lessons that will tell you about a kind career of sorts. Kind means many things. It can mean empathy, it can mean social entrepreneurship, but everything that we're going to do is going to be in this context of social entrepreneurship. This is the only thing you need to know about social entrepreneurship. That's nothing else. You marry social issues and business models. That is all. So whatever we're going to talk about here on out is going to be in the context of social entrepreneurship and in the context of entrepreneurship also. So we're going to do 3 lessons that I've learned, 3 mistakes that I've made, which led me to those lessons. So the format will follow is I'll tell you the lesson, then I won't explain it at all. I'll tell you the story behind it, and then I'll put it into the entrepreneurial context. We'll do that 3 times very quickly. So let's just get into it. Lesson number 1, always listen to the heartache. Lot of mystery around it, but like I promised, let me give you the story around it. I was a standard issue engineer. The only reason I was an engineer was because my father was an engineer, his father was an engineer, his father was also an engineer. And apparently it was safe back then. So yeah, I became an engineer. I did my time. I became an engineer from Cornell University, worked as a design engineer. So all my background has been mechanical engineering focused. But in the lockdown, when it was peak lockdown in 2020, and I was living in Mumbai in a small apartment, I had a neighbor. I had 2 neighbors actually in the same house, Mr. and Mrs. Punjabi. This is Mr. Punjabi. Mr. Punjabi figured out that I don't have access to food because the spoiled brat that I am, I don't know how to cook for my life. There was no access to groceries. So Mrs. Punjabi used to come every day to my house with a hot plate of food. And she used to make sure that I was the person to eat the food first before even they ate. And I had just no clue how to give back to Mr. Punjabi and Mrs. Punjabi. And I used to lose my mind over it. I used to be like, what can I do? And all that came to my mind was materialistic thoughts, which didn't really make sense. But then I figured out I had something that they could both use. I had a lot of it back then. And that was time. I gave Mr. Punjabi and Mrs. Punjabi a lot of time. I started having meals at their house. I opened up my life to them, and they opened up my life to me, and I could see the change that it was making in their life. Because what was in abundance with me, which was companionship and friendship and such, they didn't have any of it. They were living in a bubble in their own house. COVID was making it worse. And the time that I was giving them, which was secondary to me, was much, much needed for them. They were adapting to my energy that I brought to the house. If I was excited, they were excited. If I was happy, they were happy. If I was in trouble, they were worried. So I had a lot of time. And I gave that to Mr. Punjabi, and it changed his life in some way. And then I realized that there is many, many Mr. Punjabis out there. And who is being the young companion to them? Who is taking care of them? Who is giving them time? Who is figuring out in the first place that they need time? And so I thought that I think at least 10 other Mr. Punjabis should get this. And so I said, let me find 10 other people who feel like I do about this generation and do a small beta test. And so we did. Some of them are sitting here in the front row. They've been with me through day 1. And the 10 of us set out, and we decided we're going to be young companions to seniors who live by themselves all alone. And it became a huge success. I was right. As long as the young person is empathetic, and he has an affection towards the seniors, he can be an auxiliary grandkid of sorts almost to all the young people. And so we launched it under the title Goodfellows. And it became a huge success, and we've been operating for 6 months now. We were all over the place. But coming back to always listen to your heartaches. As a mechanical engineer, as someone who had been through the traditional education system that all of us have been through, I had every reason to not give Mr. Punjabi time. I had every reason to not give the 10 other Mr. Punjabis time, to not do the beta, to not do the launch. But when I was feeling that intense pang and that intense heartache because I was thinking about what he must be feeling, it really made me feel like I need to do something. And you might be thinking that, oh, you felt passionately about it, but we don't come across it often. You all come across that. You're just tending to ignore it, and I'll tell you why you're ignoring it, because it doesn't match your education, it doesn't match your career, it doesn't match the interview that you're going to give on Saturday for the company and the job you want. But if we don't listen to our heartaches, then what is the point? Because those heartaches, which are suffered by many people in a community, maybe you were supposed to be the savior that saves them from it, but if you ignore it, then who will discover the solution? So always listen to your heartaches, but in the entrepreneurial context, like I promise. The best ideas are in the biggest problems. If you want to be an entrepreneur, doesn't matter social entrepreneur or a unicorn entrepreneur, you have to be aware of the problems that are going around us in society, in communities, as consumers. If you want a true entrepreneurial mindset, you always have to find out what is hurting people, what is paining them. And even more, you have to be aware what that is hurting people is hurting you very much. When I saw loneliness, it was hurting me. What is that one problem or 10 problems that are really pulling on your heartstrings and telling you to do something about it? But you're ignoring it like a one-track horse because you're worried, you're scared, and that's understandable. We've all been there. Because you think it's not matching your career, it's not matching where you go. But if you want to create true change and true impact, you're going to have to let that go. But here's an idea. When you feel something pulling on your heartstrings, when you come home and you keep thinking about that one person or one animal or one problem that you saw somewhere, that you felt like you should do something about, put it down. Put down 10 such problems in a month. And maybe if you see a recurring problem coming over and over, maybe you know that's the heartache that you want to listen to. And even outside of social entrepreneurship, all the issues that people are complaining about are the issues that people will pay to get solved. And that is the meaning of entrepreneurship. You solve a really painful problem. So be aware about the problems around you. Lesson number 2, empathy without action is sympathy. It's a little bit of a reality check. But we all have empathy. And a very close friend of mine over time made me believe that everyone is a good person and everyone is empathetic. And so all of you are empathetic. Just you are in different levels of touch with it. But what you do about that empathy is going to matter in the end. If you feel strongly about something or someone and you don't do anything about it, then it's just sympathy. And sympathy didn't do anything for anyone, ever. Empathy demands action. Empathy demands action. So the next time you feel that you're being empathetic towards someone or something or a community, ask yourself, what did you do about it? This friend of mine told me and keeps telling me and keeps telling everyone in every interview, it's almost a little run down by this point, but he keeps telling it, experience everyone through others' eyes. And it sounds very much like a phrase by a Chinese master, but it's a very real phrase. And I tried practicing it after he kept insisting and realized that you have to do it irrespective of who that person is. Do you like that person? Do you love that person? Do you hate that person? And most importantly, what that person can do for you. It really doesn't matter. If you start practicing putting yourself in other people's shoes, you will quickly realize that your understanding of what they're going through improves so much that you really start being more empathetic. You really start acting from that perspective that, oh, if I was in this person's shoes, I would probably do the exact same thing. The kind of doors it would open for you if you start putting yourself in other people's shoes and then doing something about it, there's just no way around it. And that empathy demands action is the fundamental law of what is the difference between sympathy and empathy. And in the entrepreneurial context, it's that the first step is the only step. I had every fear that you will have in the future about whether this will work. How would I have known that Goodfellows will work? How would I have known that Motopause would work? But I have figured out one thing, the one key to being an entrepreneur, social or otherwise. The only step in entrepreneurship is only the first step. I do not remember what happened between the first step and where I am today. I have no clue. But all I remember is if I would not have taken that first step, I would not have figured out anything after that. And there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there who, especially after I launched Goodfellows and I launched Motopause and a couple of other initiatives, You're like, oh, ये तो मैंने सोचा था कब का. And I believe you. Because most of you sitting in the audience might have thought about already what we have done with all of this. But you don't get brownie points for thinking about an idea. Nobody recognizes the person who might have thought about it a long time ago. They only remember the people who did something about it. So just like empathy demands action, social entrepreneurship demands action. And the only action you need to worry about is not the 100 steps that are going to come after, it's only the first one. And trust me, after you take that first one, you won't even realize where it all went. You just have to dive into it, not think about it, and just do it. And there's really no excuse that you should be giving as entrepreneurs in that mindset that I have this challenge and that challenge. Of course, there are challenges. If you are trying to solve an issue for a whole community, how can you expect that to be easy? You are their savior. You are their knight in shining armor. How do you expect that to be an easy job? So the only way to do it is to do it. And how would I have reached Goodfellows if I hadn't put myself in Punjabi's position? I kept thinking about it all the time that I was spending at home in the lockdown. I was like, what is he thinking right now? When I was not in lockdown, what was he doing all day? What was Mrs. Punjabi doing all day? Who were they speaking to? Who was there to listen to them? I put myself in that position because Mr. Tata taught me to. And I realized that just opened doors for me on how I can solve it. So the only way to do it is just to do it. You just have to, there's just no way around taking that first step. So stop looking for excuses. Stop looking for saying things like, I could have saved him, or I could have helped him, or I could have solved that problem, but I had other things to do. Then that will never make it in reality. And the third and the important one is that the only story that matters is you. I'm going to show you three faces that we have seen over and over and over. And at this point, I'm a little nauseated seeing them because our parents have shown them, you've seen them online, LinkedIn, Instagram, everywhere. You know, Bill Gates, Satya Nadella, and Sundar Pichai. We've seen so many quotes that go alongside their pictures that have probably not even been said by them, but really doesn't matter. It's so much has been in the Indian education system ingrained that these are the benchmarks for success. Are these successful people? Absolutely. Are these inspirational people? Absolutely. But should you replicate each and every fiber of their being to try and be them? No. You should draw inspiration and choose what is relevant to your story. Because we don't need another Bill Gates and Sundar Pichai and Satya Nadella. It's 2023. We need people who save communities. We need people who recognize those who are in distress. And we need you guys to stand up for them. There is nobody else coming to help. It's all you. It's the young generation. They're calling us the young country. It's all in your hands. If you're thinking in your mind, somebody else will do it, somebody else will pursue that story, no, it's not going to happen. And how sad is it that we as Indians are so good at replicating exactly what someone has done before, including what sweater they wore at that exam. And mom will make you wear the same sweater for that exam in the hopes that you will crack the same score. We have gone to that extent. But the moment you are replicating somebody else's story, you're throwing your own script out of the window, and that is heartbreaking. Because I want to see your script. The world needs your scripts. Please don't underestimate them, and please, in your language, start being the main character. We need some main character energy. So when you see a dance, when you see a movie, you're always following the main character. If you're the backup character in your own movie, trying to be somebody else, then that's just sad because we are missing out on a ton of stories and a ton of TED Talks. This is the question that pushed me to think about my story. When I was sitting one night, late night shift, 2:30 p.m., Tata Ecstasy, my first job, I was just thinking to myself, if I disappeared today, died, kidnapped, whatever it is, what would I leave behind? What have I left behind? And I don't mean in terms of riches and fame and Instagram followers, but in terms of whose life did I change? What will my story be? Will my story inspire others? And the answers to that were very difficult to digest because there were none. And this is a question you should ask yourself often. If I disappear today, what will I be known as? A 10 to 5 engineer who could be replaced in 2 days, which I was, by the way, the day I quit? Or someone who really left a story behind that I could read and be inspired and create some change? And not all stories have to be phenomenal, and not all stories have to be headlining. But they have to be unique and they have to be yours. So to give you an example, when I went to Cornell, this was my life. I said yes to everything, every choice. And the reason this slide looks so colorful and you're looking at every picture right now is because I did everything opposite of what my classmates did at that MBA, which was be in suits, network with companies, the Big Four, McKinsey, Deloitte. If I was doing that, this slide would be full of different colored suits. I had only two, so two colored suits. But this would not be as colorful. And I had no business doing all of this. Like I started a motorcycle club at Cornell where there were like 7 motorcycles in the whole town. I worked on a film set with my best friend as the guy who does this slating, absolutely useless. I started the Pet Society. I was singing at a bar. It was not even paid. But when I narrate my story at Cornell and when my classmates do, it's a very different version, and I'm so proud of mine. Because I said yes to so many choices, and these choices lead to some amazing things, by the way. Choices lead you to places that you didn't imagine or plan for. And so you should really believe in those gut feelings. For example, when I started Motopause, which was a reflective color thing for that project, or when I was making music videos as a teenager on a 7 megapixel camera, please don't ever Google or YouTube those. It was a horrible video. But they led me to these 3 people. They led me to Mr. Tata. They led me to a great friend. They led me to Sukrut, who's my best friend, who was the person behind the 7 megapixel camera. And they led me to Winter because I eventually went to Cornell because of my story. And how could I have possibly planned all this? How could I have even gotten all this if I would have done everything that everyone else expected me to? And even with Goodfellows, I never imagined I would be surrounded by people who love saving other people. It's just ridiculous how much love this group collectively has. I never would have thought that I would be sitting in the middle surrounded by so many empathetic individuals, all because I just listened to my heartache. And when you think about startups in the entrepreneurial context, you should always think about what is the impact that your startup is creating. If your startup disappeared, if Uber disappeared from the face of the earth tomorrow, what did Uber leave behind? It changed the way we travel forever. Swiggy, if it disappears, what did it leave behind? It changed the way we have lunch and food and how it fits into our lives forever. So we might think about it as like just a consumer, but on a broad level, even for-profit businesses created a significant impact. And please don't think that in order to affect a community positively, it has to be a non-profit or it has to be an NGO. And the best example is the Tata Group. For 150 years, they have been running 150 companies with so much profit and revenue. And does that mean that they don't help communities and how they come up? No. They create wealth for the country. They create wealth for those who are underprivileged. They create wealth for the employees within. So social entrepreneurship or a for-profit business taking care of people or impacting a community positively is not mutually exclusive from making profit. And that profit should be used in a sustainable way for your stakeholders, for people who can benefit from it, for people who can't reach it. So please stop thinking about your life in 2 different choices only, which is either to go with non-profit and social change or to go with for-profit and corporate or whatever it is. They can very much be married. I showed you an amazing picture in the beginning. You better remember that. So what legacy is your startup creating? You need to remember that. And forget Sharma and his beta. First of all, what is this patriarchy? What is beta? Where is the beti? So don't go by any standard. And this is so important because for the longest time, my own father was telling me about this colleague of his whose son got a Google package of 40 lakhs, and he kept repeating and repeating, not because he was trying to influence me, but I was getting influenced. After a certain point, I realized that suddenly my goal is also Google package 40 lakhs. I didn't even realize why am I chasing this? Apparently, it's just because it's been going on in our backgrounds, and it's tough. It's tough when your batchmates are constantly talking about a particular thing, like a master's, and suddenly you don't want to do master's, but you're like, but that would be wrong. But why? Just because everyone else is doing it. So forget all, this is the time, 2023 is the time, past the time, where you think about stereotypes, where you think about trends. No profession is safe. I know Harvard graduates who are unemployed. No country is safe, no degree is safe. So might as well do what you want to do, what you feel in your heart you have to do, and what impacts the most number of people positively, all the while making profit also. You don't have to skip that part. And the right way is seldom the easy way. You'll be judged quite a lot. You'll be judged quite a lot. When I was in my engineering days and I was sort of tinkering with motor paws, I was judged so bad. Like it was like, at that age, it was ridiculous to be bullied. Like who bullies anybody at that age? But I was getting bullied in engineering. I don't know why. But all the music videos that I was making and everything, like just like constant fun. It is always going to stand out when you go against the flow, but it is supposed to. How can it not stand out if you are doing something nobody has done before, creating something nobody's created before? Of course it's going to stand out. Of course it's going to be in critics' faces, but you have to keep going in that direction. Please don't be swayed by anything at all. So I'm excited for your stories, stories that would change the world. And one extra lesson that I will give you before going. Apparently it doesn't go back. Yeah, okay. One extra lesson that I'll give you before going, which is not in the 3 mentioned here, is if you have a business idea, and I'm telling you from the perspective of Goodfellows, this is what I learned. If you have a business idea or a startup idea or a social entrepreneurship idea, whichever idea that you want to execute, don't keep it secret. Shout it from the rooftops, make it public, tell it to the world. And it is a very, very Asian thing, I think, to sort of cling on to it and hide it and protect it and like, this is my idea. It will never go anywhere if you keep clinging on to it like that. It needs to be exposed to the world, and all the attacks that it would face and all the criticism it would face. Imagine your idea like a rough boulder. And if you keep hiding it, it's going to be a rough boulder at the end. But if you let people attack it and chisel away at it and carve away at it, it becomes somewhat of a sculpture that you want it to resemble. So please don't be scared of really, and I'm telling you from the Goodfellows perspective because the people sitting in the front row are here because I just literally, when I got the idea, I went online on Instagram and I said, I have this idea. This is how exactly I'm going to execute it. This is what my business model is going to be. Do you want to join me? Under no circumstance I would have thought that I would have gotten the 10 people that you saw here to do the beta test. And if you think somebody is going to steal your idea, and if it's that easy to steal your idea, then you probably need to rethink your idea because they'll do it anyway. So be transparent with the world about what you're thinking about, and you will just find the right people. And empathy, kindness, and for-profit business or startup that you want to see as a unicorn via Shark Tank or wherever does not have to be mutually exclusive. Please stop distinguishing kindness as something that cannot be a part of your career as you go along it. So choose how it's going to overlap. Tell me about the stories that you come about, and if you ever need any help, I'm here for you. So yes, thank you.